Hey everyone, Ryan here with Ray's Latest, and today we're going to talk about some comments that Eric Neander has made regarding the outfield and catching situations, and we're going to talk about the Rule 5 draft deadline that will be tomorrow, which the day this is airing. So Tuesday, November 18th is the Rule 5 draft deadline. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Right now, we're going to talk about what Eric Neander has recently said when he was talking with a reporter this past week. I'm just going to kind of read it kind of word for word for you here so you get the kind of the full scope of what he was saying. He said he was asked on the outfield situation. He says, "The outfield is three spots we've got to get right. I'd probably lean towards the outfield being the area that we're spending the most time and energy just trying to make sense of how to best put it together for next year. The actual results and output of that unit on both sides of the ball, offense and defensively, is not as collective where it needed to be. The first part of that is really assessing the players we have and who's most likely to contribute more than that moving forward. And then, certainly, in addition to that, it's looking to see if there's anything outside the walls of our organization that could help us further." And I think that's kind of what every single other fan in the entire organization kind of thinks. We have the people in the outfield now in Simpson, Mangum, occasionally Josh Lowe, that can kind of get the job done for you. And with Simpson and Mangum especially, just the getting on base, the bat to ball, the low strikeout rates, it's kind of what you want to see. The slugging and the home runs, not necessarily, you're not going to get that at all from those guys. But you know that kind of going into it. And defensively, there's definitely a drop off. I would say to 90% of the other outfields in Major League Baseball. I think we have one of the bottom defensive outfields. Ever since Kiermaier left, we had Siri who was fantastic out there, but other than that, there really has not been another outfielder in our organization that has played, I would say, elite defense that we're used to having in center field. So I kind of understand kind of like where he's coming from. Ideally, you want to address what we currently have. And for the Rays being such an organization that doesn't have the amount of money that you would like to have for a professional sports team, keeping it in house and kind of developing and going through the draft and things of that nature to get the players kind of like we have done and like we have done with Simpson and Mangum and Lowe, respectively. It's kind of one of those things where you you're getting production out of the guys that you are paying the league minimum and they're doing what they're supposed to do, but there's just seems like there's that missing piece that just hasn't been ticked off yet. And I think I've addressed it multiple times, and I think everybody kind of knows that we need that corner outfielder that's got elite power and is going to hit you 30 home runs and have an above 900, 950 OPS is what you really want. But one of those guys is most likely not going to be in the Rays price range. And I think Neander knows that. And I think that kind of everybody needs to understand that as well. Like there's only so much you can do. Like you go out and you get a Christopher Morel who's gonna hit for power and is gonna have the juice to hit you home runs, and he kind of just flops on you, and it's just not no production, and it just really hasn't been anything that you look at him and you're like, yeah, that guy is gonna be an everyday outfielder for us. And I think that most of the fan base doesn't even want him on the roster anymore, which I am kind of one of those guys as well. But if he's one of those guys that just clicks it in gear this year and is great, fantastic. Like I think Neander knows this, kind of like what I was trying to get to a little bit earlier. He knows that we're not going to be able to afford an elite outfielder, and his job is to piece together 26 men who are going to play and produce in kind of not necessarily a Moneyball situation where you're trying to piece three players to get one, but that's in retrospect, it's kind of what you're trying to do. You're not going to be able to go out and get a guy who's going to single handedly hit you 40 home runs in a year for that price range. You could throw a stab in the dark, like get Caminero for an international signing, and he does that for you. Great. And I feel like that's kind of what the Rays have been able to do. And you have Lau, but you're paying him $12 million. He's going to hit you 30 plus home runs at second base. But there's another aspect to that of how much longer can you pay him $12 million, and I don't think it's going to be that long. And so I think the problem and the issue that needs to be addressed, and I think that most of the fan base needs to know, is that we can't afford somebody who's going to just immediately plug into an outfield spot and be an everyday starter and give you exactly what you want. That's not going to happen. And I know Neander knows that, and he's been doing a great job in my opinion at trying to get guys through the organization and through trades and through free agency to do that. But I think it's just a really difficult thing to do, and I think that the fan base even kind of just needs to understand that you're going to have to get a multitude of guys to kind of plug and play and try to manufacture as much as that as you can. And so I think that it's kind of just difficult for him to do, and everybody kind of knows that. But I do think that the fan base really does need to kind of give him a little bit of slack when it comes to trying to sign a guy like that you want in the outfield. But from a catching perspective, he goes on to say, if we can find a way to be better at that position, we will. But those are two guys talking about Fortes and Fiducia. We appreciate if we roll in the next year, and that's what we got. And if a lot of players were counting on developing from where they were, and that certainly applies to those two, and I think that they can give us more than they did this past season. But in a long-standing challenge of ours, we're still trying to figure it out. So that's kind of where I was leaning towards from a catching perspective this year. I don't think that is anywhere near the top of Neander and company's problems for this season. I think that the catching position primarily has kind of always been a defensive kind of focus for us. And I think that he knows that. And I think that going into this offseason, he's kind of leading that way as to kind of try to keep it in-house and not splurge on any excess money in the offseason on a catcher. Because Fortes did a great job this past season kind of filling in towards the end of the year there. So I think from a catching perspective, that's kind of where we're at, and I think that's kind of going to be where we stay unless we make just some small minor maybe call-ups, maybe Dominic Keegan call-up, which I'll address here about him in a couple seconds. But I think that going into the season this year, I think Fortes and Fiducia will be the two catchers on the 26-man, and I don't really have a problem with that. But I would like to get another catcher on the roster, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we'll see where that goes, but I truly believe that those two will be our two catchers on the 40-man to start the year. And I think Neander's kind of trying to put that out there now to not kind of let people down and kind of just say, like, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're thinking about doing. Don't be surprised if it's still just these two on the roster when it comes down to it. So I kind of like that he came out and said that because a lot of people are questioning the catching position, even myself. So we'll see what he does with that. But like I said, I do think those two will be there at the beginning of the season. Now, kind of moving on to the Rule of 5 draft deadline tomorrow. And for those of you that do not know what the Rule of 5 draft is, it is where eligible minor leaguers must be added to the 40-man rosters by 6 p.m. tomorrow, November 18th, or else teams will lose the risk of losing some top prospects in a Rule of 5 draft, which is in December. So the qualifications are players 19 or older drafted or signed no later than 2022, and players 18 or older drafted no later than 2021 are Rule of 5 draft eligible as well, and also internationally signed players are eligible no later than 2021. So it's for, in layman's terms, it's you're adding guys to your 40-man, prospects to your 40-man to protect other teams from being able to draft them to get them into their organizations. So you have a major league Rule of 5 draft, and then there's a minor league Rule of 5 draft, which is pretty much kind of the same concept. But the Rule of 5 draft gets the other teams draft them and add them to their 40-man to kind of just balance out people not just hoarding prospects in their organization and not getting rid of them kind of thing. Is kind of at the end of the day what it is to make sure that people that are big league ready aren't just for like the Dodgers, for example. If they have the number one starting pitcher prospect in all of baseball and they're Rule of 5 eligible, it just kind of leads it up to where the Dodgers can't just hoard him in their organization for 5 years and just waste 5 years of his career kind of thing, which I don't think if he was ready, I think the Dodgers would call them said player up. But just in terms of how good their rotation is, they could just keep them down there and hold them for that long. So it's kind of a way for people to be able to draft players from other organizations if they're not added to the 40-man roster kind of situation there. So a couple players that I'm seeing that we could add to our 40-man, because our 40-man's currently full. So if we have any additions, we're going to have some subtractions, so some DFAs, some trades, things of that nature. So, but Jadir Orinamo, he was acquired in the return from Danny Jansen this past season. He, in the final 2 months of the year, he hit .255 with a .697 slugging percentage with 4 homers with a 111 WRC plus across 159 plate appearances. He in Venezuela right now, he's hitting .337 with a 1185 OPS with 8 home runs in 105 plate appearances. So that could be another infield prospect that we kind of try to keep around on the 40-man, kind of try to just bolster up maybe if Lau decides to leave and or gets traded, to kind of keep that kind of have a guy behind him, kind of look up to get into that spot if we do move on from Brandon Lau. So I wouldn't mind kind of trying to keep him on the 40-man, because if the way he keeps playing, he will get Rule 5 drafted by somebody. And the biggest name, I think, in my opinion, is Dominic Keegan. So I've had the pleasure of being able to watch him play in person in Montgomery 2 years ago. He is fantastic behind the plate. He's really good. He's got a solid bat, but it's not something that's going to kind of jump off the page at you and kind of upgrade what we currently have at the catching position, in my opinion. He was a 4th rounder in 2022. This past season, he's hit .241 with about a 900 OPS, 10 homers, and 297 plate appearances in AAA this past year with an 89 WRC plus. So the stats hitting-wise don't kind of jump off the page at you, but the tools are there, and the catching tools are also there. So it's kind of one of those things where I have seen him play in person. I think he can be a big league catcher, and he's kind of been like our catching prospect in the organization for the last couple seasons. So I'm interested to see if they do end up adding him to the 40-man, and I would be really surprised if they don't, because he's kind of the staple prospect right now, in my opinion, that could possibly see big league playing time this year, given our catching situation. So I would like to see him added to the 40-man, because I do also think he would get Rule 5 drafted by somebody. So we'll see where he goes with that, but I do think we will see him added to the 40-man. And another name, pitching-wise, Alex Cook. When he's healthy, he's fantastic. So since 2023, he has the second highest K percentage, third lowest opponent batting average, seventh highest whiff percentage, fourth lowest ERA, and second lowest FIP in the entire Rays farm system, and with at least 100 innings pitched. So there's some guys in there that have a little bit higher rating, lower innings pitched, whatever. This past season in Double-A, he pitched at a 2.3 ERA across 13 outings. So that's one of those guys where, in kind of a small sample size this past season in Double-A, because he does have an injury-ish history. So when he's healthy, he's fantastic. So at a Double-A level where it's kind of where you see most of your prospects, he's kind of excelled on the mound. And so I would kind of like to see them keep him around just to kind of see if he can transition that to maybe at a AAA level and possibly kind of get him into a bullpen role at some point, maybe in the next couple years. But I would be really, really excited to keep him on the roster. You guys let me know what you guys think, any possible players you want kept in our organization on the that are Rule 5 eligible, and also maybe your comments and concerns on our outfield and catching situation, and any questions or concerns you have on Neander's statements. You guys have a great one.